Good evening. Welcome to the Brookfield Zoning Commission regular meeting. Today is March 9th, 2023. This meeting is being held in Town Hall Room number 133. This time I would ask you to please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I would ask the commissioners to please introduce themselves, starting from my far left.
Kurt Timmerman, alternate member.
Gerald Pratt, regular member.
Andrew Kame, Secretary.
Gary Getz, Chairman.
Vishendra Kumar, Vice Chairman.
Phoebe Holmes, regular member.
Mike Lucia, alternate.
Gwen Arment, alternate.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda, item 2, continued public hearings. There are none. So before we go on to item number 3, I'd like to read the following regarding application Z-22-73 to the Brookfield Zoning Commission and members of the public. In the interest of full disclosure, I should mention that I was a regular member of Sokol Lodge number 30 for a 3-year period from August 2019 until August of 2022. I have no financial or other interest in that institution. As such, I believe that I can consider this application with fairness and objectivity. I make this disclosure voluntarily in the interest of full transparency. However, to address even the appearance of a conflict, I'm recusing myself from this application Z-22-73. Sincerely, Gary Getz. And at this time, the chair will entertain a motion to seat Mr. Kame as chairman for the purposes of this application, and also to seat Mr. Lucia to fill the vacancy created by my recusal in this case.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mr. Pratt made a motion. It's been seconded by Mrs. Holmes. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we'll call the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Nay? Are there any abstentions? That motion carries. So at this point, I will recuse myself from the proceedings until this case has been heard. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Moving on to item 3A, public hearings. This is a regular special meeting of the Brookfield Zoning Commission. At this point in our agenda, we have scheduled a public hearing concerning the application of Danbury Slovak Gymnastic Union Sokol application Z-22-73 for proposed zone change from R40 to MC. First, let me introduce the members of the commission present here this evening from my left.
Kurt Timmerman, alternate member.
Gerald Pratt, regular member.
Andrew Kame, acting chairman.
Vishendra Kumar, Vice Chairman.
Phoebe Holmes, regular member.
Mike Lucia, acting regular member.
Gwen Arment, alternate.
We will open this public hearing by calling upon the commission secretary to read the legal notice of this hearing. I will just read that myself since I happen to have it as part of this package. There was a legal notice placed in the News Times Legals from Amy Curran, the Land Use Administrative Assistant, dated January 27th, 2023 for publication. Please print the following legal notice, February 24th and March 6th, 2023. Please bill the town account. Notice. Brookfield Zoning Commission will hold a public hearing at Town Hall, 100 Pocono Road, room 133, at 7 p.m. on March 9th of 2023 of an application by the Danbury Slovak Gymnastic Union Sokol, 202 Candlewood Lake Road, for a zone change from R40 to MC. At this hearing, interested persons may appear and be heard, and written communications received. Files are available for inspection at the Town Hall. Gary Getz, chairman. The application was formally received by the commission on December 16th, 2022. The public hearing is only one aspect of the approval process and is for the purposes of accepting factual information and data bearing on this application and to allow expression of opinion by interested parties. Subsequent to this hearing, the Commission has 65 days in which to render a decision on this proposal. The final decision may be in the form of approved as submitted, approved with stipulations, or denied. After reading into the record the correspondence received by the Commission relative to this application, we will ask the applicant to present the application in detail. The presentation will be limited to 45 minutes. The Chair will then entertain questions of clarification concerning the applicant's presentation. We will hear from those who wish to speak in favor of the application, followed by those who are opposed. Comments must be limited to 5 minutes. Members of the public will have one opportunity to speak during this segment of the hearing and may also submit their concerns in writing during the public hearing. During this segment, the commissioners may ask additional questions. The bylaws of the commission allow only for the presentation of similar positions in succession and preclude the intermixture of comments, pro or con. All questions and comments must be directed through the chair. As you are recognized, please state your name and address so that your comments may be legally recorded. Please be assured that everyone will be given an opportunity to speak. However, the commission is most interested in hearing factual information relative to the application, and in view of time constraints placed upon us, we ask your indulgence in not reiterating comments previously presented. After the public comments are received, the applicant will have an opportunity to comment, and the time will be limited to 10 minutes. Are there any questions? Hearing none, we will now read the correspondence that has been presented to this. I would ask that Commissioner Pratt please read those.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, would you also please read the Planning Commission's recommendation?
Okay, I will read that. We have a recommendation from the Planning Commission here. Actually, we have the Planning Commission minutes dated March 2nd, 2023 at 7:30 p.m., room 133 in the Town Hall. It is a 6-page document. In the interest of brevity, I will just say that the Zoning Commission looked upon this application favorably, and that I believe their vote was 3 in favor and 2 opposed.
Correct.
So we have a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission as of their March 2nd, 2023 meeting. The rest of the correspondence we would go through? Okay.
Just in yellow.
Yeah, probably.
Submitted on Wednesday, January 11th, 2023, subject Land Use Department. I'd like to send in my letter of support for the VFW's Sokol Club on Kendall Lake Road in Brookfield. I can't find an email address to send it to. Nikki Giminero, 190 Kendall Lake Road, Brookfield, Connecticut, 06804. This one's dated January 5th, 2023. Good afternoon. My previous letter had not been answered. I recently became aware of an application for a zone change to R40 residential to MC Marine Commercial, just 15 feet from my home, filed by the Sokol Club. As you're well aware, I have spent the past 10 years reaching out to the town hall, all the town hall officials, requesting that 8 stipulations from 1989, copy attached, in place on the above referenced residential property be enforced. An FYI, the definition of the stipulation is a condition or requirement that is specified or demanded as part of an agreement. Some highlights of the stipulations are: maintain residential character, no further additions or expansions of the site or building, maximum boat slip is 1, maximum occupancy is defined by the fire marshal, maximum parking is 13 spaces. Commission considered this stipulation to be excessive and contrary to the spirit of the intent of the zoning regulations, and therefore the conditions should be imposed to retain residential character of the area and presence the land values.
I think
This is what you guys have.
Yeah, well, you could probably summarize.
Let's see. However, The town of Brookfield continues to ignore my request for enforcement and further has failed to take any action which has resulted in infringement to my right of the peaceful enjoyment of my residence. Nuisance, slander, defamation, life-threatening text. The person texting was arrested, charged with a TRO, and was put in place. Defamation of my character, false harassment allegations as cleared by the Brookfield Police Department. And devaluation of my residential property.
I think you're good, yeah. That's just supplements what was already said.
We already got through those, yeah, okay.
And then I think we have,
One more? No.
then we have the actual application for the zone change, which I think is just a part of, the actual application for the zone change is simply part of the record.
Correct.
Yep.
Mr.
That doesn't
Chairman,
need-
is that letter signed? I don't know who signed it.
That letter was signed by Brian Wood, Senior. Help me out with this. Mr. Wally, are you here? I believe it was signed by Mark Vaserka, okay.
Thank you.
And then we have the application for the zone change, regulation change, that's on file. And that's the application itself. Okay, so we have commenced with the reading of the correspondence, completed the reading of the correspondence received. Okay. Okay. All right, the chair is now prepared to hear the applicant's presentation. It will be limited to 45 minutes. Do we have the applicant here to speak?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, ladies and gentlemen of the public, my name is Neil Marcus. I'm a member of the firm of Cohn & Wolf PC at 158 Deer Hill Avenue, and I'm here representing the applicant, which is the Danbury Slovak Gymnastic Union, and their property is, of course, at 202 Candlewood Lake Road, which is the location of the subject matter of tonight's request for an amendment to the zoning map. And again, I'd like to just start out by saying this is a very limited request. It's a request to change a map line. It has there's no request this evening to make any changes to the use of the property or the buildings or the facilities that are located on the property. This is merely a technical line change on a zoning map. In our application, we tell you that the subject property is a pre-existing former single-family residence that was built in approximately 1952, ranch style. The property was acquired in the 1980s by the current owners, the Sokol Club. And since that point in time, it's been used as a private club and pursuant to a variance and a special permit and a site plan approval. Variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals, the site plan and special permit from this commission, obviously your predecessors many years ago. The proposal is to change the zone from the R40, single family, essentially a 1 acre zone, to the MC, which is a limited commercial use, basically related to uses that are somewhat affected by or induced by location to Lake Candlewood. So the purpose of making the zone change is to take a non-conforming property, residential, that has been used for a social public service club for so many years, and put it in a zone that allows that type of use. And when I say to make it more conforming, because of the size of the property, I'm not sure it'll ever be completely conforming in either zone, but it'll be more conforming in the MC zone than it will be in the R40. And the other reason, of course, is we want to make the zoning of this property more compatible with the uses of the adjacent properties, which comprise the MC zone, And in the MC zone, our current use is allowed. The existing MC uses, which you're probably all familiar with, are marinas, beach clubs, and the like. Years ago, when the Sokol Club first started at this location, there was a tennis club with an indoor dome across the street, which is now a marina property, or a showroom as well. The uses in this neighborhood have changed significantly over the years, and if you were to stop in front of the Sokol Club and look around, you would say the predominant uses of this neighborhood are the marine commercial. There's no question about that. And so years ago, prior to the most recent rewrite of the zoning regulations, the zone that existed next door was not as well, it didn't fit, I should say, as well with the use of the club. Essentially, when the zoning regulations were amended a couple of years ago and the new zones were created, the description of the MC zone would allow this club, this existing use of the property, to fit in like a glove. So that has given rise to the fact that maybe we should have asked when the zoning regs were created that the property be considered, but I'm not sure that the Sokol Club was aware at the point in time that the zoning regs were being rewritten. So though the club exists in the neighborhood that it's commercial, that is predominantly commercial, the zoning designation, being residential, limits its ability to make appropriate property improvements and updates. And that has a negative value on the rest of the neighborhood. So for example, without sufficient parking on the club site, which years ago was not available, parking has to either spread out onto the neighboring properties, and thankfully our adjoining neighbors are good to the club and allow parking when their parking lots aren't full. But it would encourage people to park on streets, side streets on Candlewood Lake Road, which of course is a real safety issue as it pertains to Candlewood Lake Road. You know, interestingly enough, a lot of you might remember that we had 2 horrific deaths on Candlewood Lake Road of people that were run over just down the street from the club. I mean, you could almost stand in front of the club and see where one of those accidents took place, right near Main Drive. So clearly, we want to create a situation which provides a safer environment for the entire neighborhood. And not only the entire neighborhood, anybody who just passes down Candlewood Lake Road through Brookfield, including people that are going north up to New Milford. So the zone change, we believe, should have been included in the most recent rewrite of the zoning regs, but it was overlooked, and we believe that at this point, a review by this commission, which is why we're here, will recognize, A, the historical use of the property, and B, the opportunity to improve the Candlewood Lake neighborhood. Now, your zoning commission files will show the history of this property. When the original variance was granted in the late 80s, there was a condition that was put on the property that said that you couldn't park more than 13 cars on the site. At that time, the property itself was much smaller because Candlewood Lake Road ran closer to the waters of Lake Candlewood than it does today. Subsequently, the state of Connecticut rebuilt Candlewood Lake Road. They moved it away from the waters, away from the building of the club building. And in doing that, they created an additional almost half acre of land that was acquired by the Sokol Club and is now essentially their front yard. That actual piece of property has never been part of the approval for the ZBA or the zoning commission, because all of that occurred after the original approvals. And of course, when the site was limited for parking, it was, as I say, much smaller. And there's a great deal of area on the site right now which provides additional parking. As a matter of fact, the additional parking is all squeezed up in the area of the old state right-of-way, because the state right-of-way was used for people to park. You could park along Candlewood Lake Road. Now you park where you used to park along Candlewood Lake Road, and you're on property of the Sokol Club. But we tried to address this about 2 years ago, and we went to the Zoning Board of Appeals to seek a variance for 2 reasons. We thought that it was a hardship and that the circumstances had changed. It was a hardship to have that 13 parking space limit because of the shape of the property. It's long, rectangular, and narrow. And because of the location of the building that was constructed in 1952, we asked the Zoning Board of Appeals to grant a variance to allow us to improve the parking lot along the northerly boundary of the property, which is, of course, the Beach Club, the Candlewood Beach East Club. So the Zoning Board of Appeals granted that, but based on that variance, we came back before this commission, and we asked you to amend our site plan, which would allow us to construct the property, the parking. And you did. You granted it. And of course, there was an appeal by our neighbor to the south, Mr. Pasurka. And the outcome of that appeal was that the court held that the Zoning Board of Appeals could not have been, was not justified in finding a hardship. And therefore, once that was decided, it was agreed that the zoning commission's revised site plan approval could not stand either, because your site plan approval would then be contrary to the existing ZBA decision from the late 80s, early 90s. So at that point, we asked the court to basically rule on the issue of whether we could make the property more conforming by adding the parking that would be required for the MC zone on our site. And our argument was the property around us is now MC, our use is MC, and we could at least make our residentially zoned property more conforming. And unfortunately, that issue was never resolved, was never decided by the court. So we then decided to bring this application because we can make the property more conforming to the zoning regulations, which, by the way, is the goal of every zoning commission and every zoning board of appeals that operates in the state of Connecticut. So the goal, it's the proper goal. How do you make something more conforming? If we can make the property more conforming, then we give control over the use of that property to the zoning commission, actually. Because if we're now in the MC zone and we want to make any change, we have to come back to this commission and ask you to approve that change. Site plan. At the moment, since the property is operating under a variance, we can basically use the property in any manner that it was used back in the late 1980s, in the early 1990s, when the variance was granted. So there's less municipal control over a non-conforming property than a more conforming property. So again, the purpose of the zone change is to try to operate the physical property in a manner that reflects what goes on in the neighborhood and in the MC zone. But like every other zoning application, where do you draw the line? That question is, it's the old chicken and the egg, actually. Where do you draw the line? Do you draw the line here, or 100 feet away, or 200 feet away? Well, we're asking actually to draw the line about 100 feet away. And we're asking you to draw the line on the south side of the subject property as opposed to the north side of the subject property. You have the authority to do that. If you find that circumstances have changed and that the use of the property in the neighborhood warrants the redrawing of the line. Zoning lines are changed all the time. And when I say that, they're changed because uses of properties change over the years and neighborhoods change over the years. And at the end of the day, there's always the odd parcel out. And that's what we are. We're the odd parcel out. We have been used in a manner similar to all of our neighbors to the north and directly across the street to the north. But we're still suffering from an single-family residential zoning designation that's left over from when the property was not the Sokol Club. So the purpose of this application is to allow the town of Brookfield to have a little more control over the site plan of the property. In reality, I'll make no bones about it. If the site plan, if the property is changed, we're going to come back to you with the site plan that you guys approved about 3 years ago. We're going to say, let us make a better parking lot. By the way, the screening that we promised to do back 3 years ago, we did that anyway, because the screening just makes sense. It makes sense whether it's residential or or marine commercial facility. The size of the property, again, I'm going to give you your question. Your question to me should be, well, Mr. Marcus, if we change it to MC and the Sokol Club disappears, what are all the other uses you could do on this property? And the answer is not much, because the property is too small. I said it was going to be more conforming, but not completely conforming, so that any subsequent use of that property in the MC zone, other than the Sokol Club, would probably require both a zoning variance and obviously an approval from this commission. So at this point, we think that the applicant has every valid reason, I should say, and reasons, to seek the amendment to the map. And we understand, as I say, that some people will be worried about it. They're going to say, well, if you change it there and you draw the line 100 feet from where it is today, where are you going to draw it next? And the answer to that is, it will depend upon if the neighborhood changes. If other properties change their use over the years, or if the ZBA grants a variance to a different use, then maybe the next property to the north or the next property to the south will seek an expansion of the zone. But this application doesn't really seek any changes to the use of this property whatsoever. And that's important, given the fact that you go back for almost, 35 years now and look at the fact that that the property, for more than 35 years, and look at the property as having been used for a use that is allowed currently in the MC zone. So there are a lot of people here tonight, and I have a tendency to rattle on at great length if not cut off. So I'll cut myself off here and tell you that we know we're going to hear from some neighbors, and some of the neighbors are going to say that they're opposed to this either because they just don't like the Sokol Club, or they don't like the fact that there's any change in the zoning map. And I understand that goes with the program. You seek a zone change, you expect that some people are going to be opposed to it. But I'd ask you, as you hear the opposition, and hear the proponents as well, that you focus in on what's the use of this property today, what's the use of this property tomorrow, where is the zoning reg more appropriate for that use. And I think if you analyze our proposal in that respect, that you will come to the conclusion that this is appropriate. And as I say, the history is what it is, but currently there's an opportunity to improve the zoning along Candlewood Lake Road as it pertains to this property. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure I'll have the opportunity to try to answer any public questions as the evening progresses. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair is now prepared to recognize, does the audience have any questions, clarification before we hear comments pro or con? Members of the audience? Regarding the application, any questions pro or con? Okay, hearing none. The chair is now prepared to recognize those who wish to speak in favor of the application. Speakers must state their name and addresses. I realize we have a number of people. The comments are limited to 5 minutes. If you can be shorter than that, we would appreciate it, since we do have a large number of people here. Whoever would like to make comments in favor of the application? Yes?
If you could just write your name on the pad, please.
Yeah, if you would, thank you. Okay.
Then your name and address for the record.
Jane Beal and 5 Maple Tree Road, Brookfield. I am a member of the Jason D. Lewis Brookfield Memorial VFW Auxiliary, and my husband Joe Beal is our post commander. He is also the VFW Chief of Staff for the state of Connecticut. Unfortunately, Joe is not able to attend this meeting tonight due to work commitments. However, he does want his voice to be heard on this important topic. So he has sent me with a letter, and his words are as follows. As post commander, I strongly encourage the Zoning Commission to approve the requested zoning designation change of 202 Candlewood Lake Road from R40 to Marine Commercial. Although the VFW has no ownership of this property, Sokol Lodge 30 have graciously let us utilise their facility for the past few years. Their generosity has enabled our post to evolve into one of Brookfield's premier community service organisations. By providing us space to meet to conduct club business, run committee meetings, plan events and store supplies, including hundreds of American flags, Sokol Lodge 30 has helped our post make all-American status, which in short means that we are one of the most successful community-minded and involved VFWs in the country. More importantly, access to this building has, for the first time in the history of the Brookfield VFW, provided the opportunity for veterans to meet privately in a safe space to discuss their unique experiences and challenges, all of which is crucial to veteran health and well-being. Veterans are people with servants' hearts. They are at their best when giving back to their community. Sitting in the meeting room in that building at 202 Candlewood Lake Road, your local veterans and auxiliary members have planned, organised, funded and executed the following: the purchase, placement and retrieval of over 120 US flags along Route 25, multiple food drives for the Brookfield Food Pantry, town ceremonies for Memorial Day and Veterans Day, care packages to our Brookfield Police and Fire Departments, lead floats at Brookfield and Bridgewater Town parades, sponsorship of the Brookfield Town Hall Wall of Honour, sponsorship of the Brookfield High School Grad Party, regularly scheduled visits from Veterans Administration to attend to the needs of disabled veterans in our community, maintenance of the Veterans Monument at Williams Park, and of course 24/7 support for our veterans and their families in countless ways, too numerous to mention. The criteria for becoming a member of the VFW is to either be active duty or honourably discharged and have served in combat, received hostile fire pay, or received a campaign medal and any other combat-related decoration. All our members have served this country with honour. Those members include federal agents, police officers, firemen, active duty military, commercial pilots, bankers, retirees. They are honest, hard-working residents of this community. They are young and old, men and women, officers and enlisted, from all branches of the services and from all fields within these services. These veterans are mothers, fathers, Little League coaches, and classroom volunteers. They donate blood, foster homeless animals, and bake cookies for cookie drives. They are your neighbours and your friends. I ask a favour of all of you here tonight. Remember all these things that a veteran is. And during the course of these proceedings tonight, when and if you hear disparaging, hurtful stereotypes or comments about any of the members of my post, or any veteran for that matter, ask yourself, what other group of people in your community could possibly be less deserving of such blatant disrespect? Fortunately,
You'll have to speak it up. You've gone over every minute.
okay, I have one more sentence.
Yes, of course.
Fortunately, Sokol Lodge 30 has embraced the veterans of the Jason D. Lewis Memorial Brookfield VFW post. They share our love of service and support, our continued commitment to our community. Thank you, Sokol Lodge 30. The respect is mutual. Grant Marine Commercial Zoning 2202 Candlewood Lake Road. Allow us to be even better. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak in favor of the application? And I take responsibility for that. Due to the number of people that we have, we were going to try to limit commentary to 3 minutes. Could I just have a quick show of hands? How many additional people would like to speak? Okay, all right. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jean Mariano. I live in Roxbury, Connecticut, but I am the president of the auxiliary in Brookfield. Approximately 3 years ago, I was asked if I would be willing to be the president of the auxiliary because the post is named after my son, Jason Lewis. All right? And I was pretty excited because I lived in Brookfield, my family was from Brookfield, my kids went through Brookfield schools. We had a connection. Brookfield mattered. And so this was an honor to me to be heading up something that was going to be helping the community, helping servicemen, helping people in need. That excited me. This is a doer group, and there have been many opportunities within the Brookfield community for us to serve. This is a snapshot. Jane already covered pretty much everything, but the food pantry. We got, I saw on Facebook that there was a need. I sent it to all of my auxiliary. We ended up with 8 bags that I brought them 2 weeks ago. We're going to again in the summer when children are out of school, and being that my children are grandchildren, I don't think about this, but they need food. Then I've talked with them, and we're going to make sure that the kids have food during the summer, right? Because they'll still be hungry. The auxiliary helps with the placement of the flags on Route 25. We march Memorial Day, give out candy to the kids. We've done thank you bags to our first responders because they give it all. They're right there. They're always the, who do we call? We support a blood drive. We've done 2 bake sales, and a portion of the money goes to a charity. This time it's going to Boxes to Boots. And in about 10 days, we're going to be assisting. We are not plunging, none of us. The Polar Plunge, that's at the town park. We're going to supply hot chocolate, cocoa munchkins, and the donations we receive will go right back to the police department. We have a yearly military ball, and at that time we honor and remember a serviceman who's been killed in active duty. All right, so we invite his parents to come, and then we also make a donation to a charity. Our first year was HOMH. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. Help Our Military Heroes. They've given almost 200 retrofitted vehicles to servicemen and women who've been injured, come back without limbs, okay? And it assists them with being going out to McDonald's or going to the park. So they're huge. And this last year we did Mission 22. Oh, Mission 22. Oh, I've been beat.
You finished up.
Okay. So we have felt loved, welcomed, and appreciated. The auxiliary is a very small part, but we support the post, and Sokol means a lot to us.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of the application? If you could just write your name on the paper, sir, and identify yourself, your name and address for the record.
Running out of ink.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Mark Omasta, O-M-A-S-T-A. I live in Danbury, 16 Driftway Point Road, and I'm currently the president of Sokol Lodge 30. Last week, the Brookfield Planning Commission voted yes. The Sokol request for a zone change from residential to marine commercial is in fact consistent with the plan of conservation and development. Chairman Van Ice stated the character of that specific area leans more commercial than residential. Commissioner Mara agreed that this area not being changed to commercial could have been an oversight in previous zoning revisions, and that Sokol and VFW activities shouldn't be restricted due to this oversight. Why commercial and why now? Was a question asked by one of the commissioners. The special permit issued by the Zoning Commission in 1989, allowing the club use in a residential zone, has proven to be so restrictive that it is near impossible for us to utilize our building and property as this special permit intended. We contend a hardship was established way back in 1989 with a special permit. For instance, the special permit states our indoor capacity will be specified by the fire marshal. The marshal set our capacity at 115 people seated inside. So we can seat 150 people in an indoor event, but are restricted to 13 cars in our parking lot. The math doesn't work. We purchased 1/4 of an acre of land since 1989, as Attorney Marcus mentioned, and so we had plenty of room to expand our parking. In 2019, the ZBA and Zoning Commission acknowledged this and approved our application to modify the special permit with additional parking, stating the property has received variances varying certain dimensional requirements applicable to club use in this zone. Both the ZBA and the zoning votes were unanimous back in 2019. With this approval, we built a 30-vehicle parking lot in early 2020, utilized it without any issues. Mr. Vasurka appealed this very logical ZBA ruling, and an appellate judge overruled the variance, stating a technicality that the ZBA's reason of safety wasn't enough really to modify the special permit. That ruling came down January 2022. So back to square one, except now we have a nicely designed and approved parking lot, and we're prevented from using it. Was that 5 minutes?
We were trying to limit it to 3, but if you just have a few more, another few 30
Okay.
seconds or so, will be fine.
Thank you, sir. Another restrictive part of the 1989 special permit is the part that states we need to maintain the residential character of the site, and no further addition or expansion of the site shall be permitted. In other words, we're allowed to operate as a club. We are not permitted to expand and improve our building or the site to facilitate club use. The Zoning Commission understood this problem in 2019 when they voted unanimously to modify that permit. I wanted to mention 2014, to go back a bit. We did first apply to the ZBA for relief of our parking situation. There was a public hearing. Mr. Vasurka labeled us as drug abusers and crazy, out-of-control partiers that might have affected the ZBA, but they denied our application at that time. But they did say, they suggested that we apply for a zone change. So that's what we're doing. We're applying for the zone change. We feel it's a much better fit for club use, much better fit in MC commercial than residential.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of the application? And if you could just write your name on the paper, sir, and identify yourself for the record, and we're trying to limit this to 3. How many more folks would like to speak? We have a couple more folks behind you, so if you could limit.
I'll be brief, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Perone. My current address is 209 Carmen Hill Road in New Milford. I grew up in this town. I recall going to Grossman's when Federal Road had 1 traffic light on it, and I watched this town evolve to where it is today. I am a Sokol Lodge 30 member, and I'm also the junior vice for the Jason D. Lewis Brookfield Memorial Post. Being a fairly active member in both non-profit, and I stress non-profit organizations, I would like to dispel any narratives that the purpose of this application is for marine commercial is to turn the premises into a full-blown marina. In fact, the real reason for this application is because as an organization, we have exhausted all their legal and civil means to operate freely as a non-profit organizations. Both organizations' sole purpose is to provide for the community of Brookfield, and I'm sure tonight, as you have heard, you've heard what we've been able to do for the community thus far. Both these organizations require membership, and the premises will remain private property. And regarding the letter that was read in pertaining to the beginning of this meeting, with threatening text and whatever else, police reports will show that was not from a Sokol and or a VFW member. So the public record will reflect that. I'd like to reference a recent incident that occurred on Veterans Day when we were invited to center school. While meeting with parents, an individual approached me and introduced himself, and the first question was, "Where is the Brookfield VFW?" Due to current restrictions, neither organization is allowed to have signage to identify themselves, and through this board, if they support the change, this will allow both of these organizations to further establish themselves within the community and produce better service for the community of Brookfield. We appreciate your support in allowing us to better serve the community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of this application? If you could just write your name on the paper, please, so we have it for the record, and if you could identify yourself for the...
Sure. Good evening. My name is Carrie Summer, and I live at 13 Rabbit Lane in Brookfield, Connecticut. I don't want to reiterate what everyone else has been saying, but just specifically, just to touch on the fact, I am the auxiliary treasurer, and I'm also the secretary for the Sokol Lodge 30. And we, as everyone has explained, we do so much for the community. That's our main purpose, as well as supporting veterans and their families. And part of our limitation is the activities we want to do, we can't. We're limited to because of our parking situation, as well as not being able to do the improvements to the building, as well as no signage. I've been working with someone from the Red Cross recently to try to get a blood drive at our facility. And while it was deemed as too small square footage-wise, which that happens, one of the things was, the woman trying to find the place couldn't find the place. There was no signage, no nothing. 4 phone calls later, she was finally able to enter the building, and she gave it her best chance to try to figure out how to do it. But then my second thought was, how could we possibly have a blood drive here with only being able to have 13 cars? Am I to ask the American Red Cross workers, once they empty their cars, to move them? Am I asking people who have just donated blood and done a wonderful service to walk to the back of the parking lot? So it's things like that that are frustrating. We do wonderful things and we do great things for people and we continue to do so. We continue to add more activities to our repertoire, more service to our community. However, we can do so much more. Between all three organizations, we have room to grow, but we're stuck at this point. We're limited with what we can do. We can't use our facility the way we would like to. And at the end of the day, like I mentioned, we're doing great things for our community and we want to do more. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in favor of this application? Hearing none, the chair is now prepared to recognize those who wish to speak in opposition to this application. Sir?
Yes, I am.
If you could take the podium and write your name and address on the paper and identify yourself for the record.
Well, my name is Michael Leventhal. I'm an attorney. I represent Mark Vasurka. Mr. Marcus knows me. We opposed each other in the appeal from the granting of the 2019 variance. Before you start timing me, I'm not going to be able to make my presentation in 5 minutes. It's just impossible. So if that is going to be the case, I'm going to need to be able to present to the commission information by way of a letter afterwards. I can't do it in 5 minutes.
I'm going to defer 1 second here.
It's your prerogative, Mr. Chairman, that, you know, this is an attorney, he's here representing his client. If you want to make a special exemption for him, it's certainly up to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, how much time would you need, sir?
I'll try to go as quickly as I can, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
15 minutes, you have it.
Okay. All right, again, my name is Michael Leventhal. My office address is 30 Huntington Street in Shelton, Connecticut. I represent Mark Vasurka, who is the owner of the immediate abutting property to the south, which is 198 Candlewood Lake Road. It's also designated as 200 Candlewood Lake Road. I'd like to address some of the arguments that Mr. Marcus made tonight and in his application. He states that the property was acquired in 1980 and since then has been used as a private club pursuant to variances and a special permit and a site plan approval. Little brief history. In 1988, the ZBA granted a variance to Sokol for the minimum rear yard, side yard, and front yard requirements contingent on the commission approving usage as a private club in a residential zone. In 1989, the board granted a variance to permit 13 parking spaces in the front on the existing paved area. It provided parking only in the front on the paved area and no parking permitted on the grass, and no additional paving for parking. That same year, after the two variances were granted, a special permit was granted, which allowed Sokol to operate as a club in the residential zone. That's permit number 89-9. Now, I have copies of all these. I can present these to you as part of the record if you would like.
Yes, we will accept any information tonight as part of the record.
So I'm presenting to you, sir, the 1988 and the 1989 variance and the special permit.
Okay.
Special permit came with special stipulations in which the zoning commission stated it is the intent of the permit that the variances granted were, quote, excessive and contrary to the spirit and intent of the zoning regulations, and therefore conditions should be imposed to retain the residential character of the area and preserve land values. Premises should revert to strict conformance with the regulations at the earliest possible moment. So the intent there was that it should retain its residential character. In 2014, Sokol applied for a third variance to increase parking, and that was denied based on the finding that there was no hardship, there was a self-induced hardship due to increased activity. Sometime after 2014, I believe, Sokol says it was in 2018, Sokol invited VFW Post 10201 to join with it in sharing the use of the property, and that continues to this day. And so that means that since sometime after 2014, there are two entities occupying the property, and with the addition of the VFW Post, which we have no opposition to the VFW, they do great things, that's not the issue. But the usage of the property has increased exponentially with parties, weddings, memorial services. More than 13 cars are parked there, and it results in increased noise, doors slamming at night, loud noise, loud music, and increased traffic in and out of the subject property. And they have had gatherings with in excess of 150 people from time to time. Now, in 2019, Sokol and the VFW applied for a variance to expand the parking from 13 spaces to 30 spaces. And they also applied for a special permit with the commission to increase their activity. The variance was granted, special permit was granted. The variance was a condition precedent to the special permit. Special permit was granted. They immediately put in 30 parking spaces, which was in their plan, as permitted by the 2019 variance. On behalf of Mr. Vasurka, I appealed the ZBA decision, and I prevailed. The appeal was sustained by Judge Brazell Macero of the Danbury Superior Court. Cases Vasurka versus Brookfield, docket number CV 19-6033-795. And the court found, among other things, that any hardship was self-induced due to the increased activity on the property with the two entities using it. So I offer into the record that decision as well. I'm offering into the record the decision from January 3, 2022, in which my appeal was sustained. Sokol and VFW filed a motion to reconsider that. That was denied in, I apologize. The original decision is June 28, 21. The motion to re-argue was denied January 3, 2022. There were appeals taken for certification to the Court of Appeals, denied. They sought certification by the Supreme Court. That was dismissed. So I'm offering those into the record as well.
Thank you.
So it's our position, and actually, once we got to the end of the road with the appeals, we had a stipulation between all parties, including the commission that was represented by Mr. Beecher, that because the appeal of the variance was sustained, that means that the special permit granted by the commission in 2019 was void, and that was stipulation signed by all parties to that case. I'll present that to the record. And then Judge Brazell Macero, I've attached it. I've entered that as a judgment. It is attached. So, since June of 2022, we are back to the 1988 variances and the 1989 special permit, meaning that no more than 13 cars can be parked at one time on the subject property, and no parking can take place on the grass. This is unfortunately not enforced. My client has, as I'm sure you're aware, submitted several complaints about parking taking place on the grass, more than 13 cars being parked there, frequent gatherings. When we seek enforcement, we're told that They're not parking on Sokol property. They don't accept drone photos. None of that is correct, because that was clarified to me this week by Ms. Hodza, that they do accept drone photos. So my client has submitted photos. For example, this photo that was taken in September of 2022, which I'm offering, showing that parking is not taking place in the parking lot that they have, but it's taking place on the grass. Now, the owner seeks to change from an R40 to an MC zone. And what they claim is, the reason is to make the use of the property conform to the Brookfield zoning regulations and be more compatible. In her decision, which I presented to you, Judge Brazel Maceros wrote, and I quote, "The property has been described by many as a buffer or the last piece of residential property abutting the commercial use beginning with O'Hara's Boatyard." This is a small lot. In 1989, when the commission granted the special permit, it was clear and it stated that the lot should retain its residential character. If you look at that zoning map, the map that's right behind you, you'll see that the Sokol property is immediately south of the O'Hara property. And in fact, and I was surprised to discover this, Mr. Marcus says, well, this is primarily a commercial zone. It's not. If you look at that zoning map, you'll see that only the O'Hara property and the property owned by a company called Rick Rack on the Lake is in that zone. And they both have quite excessive acreage. The property that is owned by O'Hara's has 2.6 acres on the lot that is directly north of the Sokol property, and across the street at 213 Candlewood Lake Road, it has 4.5 acres for a total of 7.1 acres. 225 and 227 Candlewood Lake Road, which are owned by Rick Rack on the Lake, Inc., has an excess of 9 acres. The Sokol lot is 1.07 acres. Everything else surrounding those parcels is R40. So why do they need to convert to the MC zone? Why do they need to assist properties in the MC zone? If anything, this property should remain more compatible with the residential properties that surround it. And that's what the commission said in 1989. If you drive down there today, and I'll offer into the record I did make a small printout of the zoning map. I'll offer it. The same one right behind you.
Thank you.
And I also have your GIS that shows that if you come down Candlewood Lake Road, right past where my client's house is, and come down the hill, you see these marinas with all these boats wrapped in their winter protection. And the application seeks to bring that activity closer to the residential zone that it abuts. Now, I'm going to try to move faster. In their application, they say the club is limited in its ability to make necessary property improvements and updates, which has a negative impact on the neighborhood real estate values. That's what they say. To the contrary, it's our position that if this is permitted, it will have a more negative effect on neighboring properties. And I support that statement by the fact that in 2020, Mr. Vaserko went to the tax assessor and applied for a devaluation of his property for the reason that he was being subjected to excessive noise from the neighbor. And in fact, the assessor granted his application. They devalued his property by $30,000 for what they called commercial influence and excessive noise. And I put this into the record too, the application and the devaluation by the Brookfield tax assessor. It's my position that if this is allowed, property values will go down more because they're going to seek to expand their usage and their parking. Now, one thing that has not been addressed, and that is what your requirements are in analyzing this. And Section 8.6D of your regulations require you to determine if the zone change will protect the public health, safety, welfare, or property values. I have addressed the property values. My position is that property values, especially my clients, will go down further than they've already gone down. Secondarily, let's look at the health. With this application, they've submitted no traffic study. They're looking to expand and increase traffic. How is that going to affect the safety of people on that road? They've offered nothing to that effect. Next, the septic system. Do they have a septic system that can handle increased activity? In granting the 2019 special permit, the commission actually told them that if you're going to have gatherings of 150 people or more, you have to use porta-johns. That's in that special permit that's now been voided. I've spoken with the town sanitarian. There is no as-built on file for this septic system. They don't know where it is. For all we know, it might be a cesspool. So they've offered no study as to the capacity of their septic system.
You can go, if you need another 5 minutes, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm almost done.
Okay.
So, .202 Candle Lake Road is subject to the 1989 special permit, the intent of which was to maintain the residential character of the lot and that it should eventually revert back to completely residential, not expand into more commercial. Sokol operated for at least a quarter of a century with the 1989 special permit, and it was only when they invited the VFW to share the property, expand the use, that it needs to have more activity, and thus more parking, more traffic, and increased septic use. So I ask that you follow what you're required to do under 8.6D of the regs and determine that this expansion will not protect the public health, safety, welfare, or property values. In fact, my position is that the zone change, if granted, will negatively impact the public health, safety, and welfare, as well as the property value of neighboring properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a second part of this? This is the introduction to the public hearing. Is there a second part to this? Another page?
This is the,
That's it.
oh no, this is my thing.
Okay.
Oh, this, no, I don't know if you wrote that.
Well, if it please the commission, I'd like to ask that for a motion for a short recess of about 5 minutes for everyone. So if someone would like to
I'll make that motion.
Make a motion to have a short recess.
We have a
5
motion,
minutes.
seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, folks, we're gonna take a short recess here.
Yeah, I think this is pretty detailed.
Yeah.
Intense. This is a lot to go through. So it's the history of the property. That's pretty neat that they prepared it for each choice. He didn't mention that he prepared it for each choice.
No, it was supposed to be mentioned where it came from.
Yeah, like he didn't, but.
I don't know where I am. I guess when it starts with a history and violation, I kind of know who it's from.
Right? This is like going to a residential property and you decide to make commercial and then you.
Where's that on here?
Usually that's before.
apply for a change of zone.
Kind of, but I mean, it's been since 89 or 80s. I mean, the property's changed over the life.
So number 10 would be,
You can just ask, does any of the commissioners have comments for the applicant?
What about
okay,
the
we do that.
surrounding?
So this is,
For the neighbors, I know.
this is 10.
They
I
like,
really hope we
Sorry,
don't vote
this would be 11.
oh, I don't think so.
Comments by commissioners.
We can,
I hope they continue.
For applicant.
we can do the applicant.
Make a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Yes, there you
I have
go.
to read this fine.
Stuff that he gave.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to read it
I
all.
pretty much read it.
You what?
Yeah.
I before.
You what?
I've read a lot of it before.
Okay.
No, the most recent training.
The
This is all
letters.
new to me, so I've never been to the club. Have you?
No.
Yeah, I'd like to drive by. I need to use the
Yeah.
ladies' room. I gotta go.
You would never know. It's a yellow
really?
ranch building.
Oh, yeah.
But to have 150 people,
Sounds like a lot for 1 acre.
well, and it's a little, yeah, where is the septic? Do
Good,
they,
very good question.
do they have a liquor license? I mean, why is there?
Well,
do
if
they
if
bring
it's a
their own?
residential, I guess you're allowed. You don't need a house, I guess.
So they bring their own.
I don't know what they do.
Do they have the insurance? It's like our club. We used to serve. We
Uh-huh.
can't do that anymore. You have to bring your own
Okay.
because insurance.
Where's that folder go?
Probably.
It's tough, but I really feel for the neighbors.
You know, this,
I really do.
It was in there.
yeah, I guess it's,
I wouldn't like it.
Right.
Especially if, and here, look at this. If there's a transfer of ownership, and I think there was, stipulation becomes null and void, which means they can't even do what they're doing.
I don't know if they transferred ownership.
I think it did. Fran, did this change ownership after '89? So the Sokol Club has owned it all this time?
My understanding, yeah.
I thought it changed ownership.
Yeah, this is like, has a magnet.
I won't endorse drone photos. I can't use drones for enforcement, so I won't take them. You can't do that. The ones that have a drone will fly over everybody's yard. You can't do that. I don't know why she says it.
Headboard process. Making all benefits.
Yeah. What is that? That's not an iPod, is it?
No, it's
Yeah.
called remarkable. You know, see what happens when you're on Facebook. But admittedly, I waited 3 years before actually switching. And, you know, sometimes, you know, small screen.
The air apparent.
Mine's pretty good. Giving out scripts. They get any slack by the record. I make my next one. Right. This is short.
They're still over there in the appeals meeting.
Oh, that's your pen.
Yeah, it's a long one for those guys.
Got your other paperback or not?
Which one?
Did you find the second page of your script?
No.
You were looking. So you do. So this is what I would recommend.
Wait,
so
is
Mr.
that in here?
Pacerka will want. Oh no, you're saying you're missing it, right? You said Mr. Pacerka would like to speak, so I guess you should let him. And then you have to let Mr. Marcus rebut.
Okay, hang on. What I got after this, when we come back, is comments by the commissioners.
Well, Mr. Pacerka would like to speak.
Do you want to put him in here?
Mike Meyer was on these for 5 minutes.
Okay.
Speak in opposition to the application.
Nobody. Anyone else to
Oh,
speak in
okay,
opposition?
okay, okay.
Too bad they don't have it on a night where we can come.
I would go.
Would you come regularly if they changed it?
Okay.
Like you and me would be regulars?
Certainly if there was
Then,
one
when they care,
So
don't
far,
agree.
all the ones that they mentioned, I would have read.
Okay, but do the commissioners
Oh,
comment
well,
on
I'm
that?
less inclined to read that.
Okay. I feel bad though.
Yeah,
So you're allowed to, you guys are allowed to ask questions of. That's not a good sign.
Okay, so you would say that we do Mr. Vaserka, then we would do the, Mr. Marcus, and then, at that point, it would
Then you
be
can ask what's 25.
then
Ask
questions of the commissioners?
Yeah, ask questions of, and you can ask questions of any of the landlords.
Okay, and let me just ask you a quick question. I just did want to make a comment. Anybody here that wants to submit any documents can?
Yeah, but they, you already said, I would need that.
Okay.
Yeah, and you would, because communications can be received, and you said that in your speech.
And they can still submit them.
Yeah, but as long as the public hearing remains open, they can submit them to you. You work outside the home, right? Like, you don't work from home, or do you? What do you do? I didn't realize that. What do you do?
Having a very good
I am.
Enjoying themselves.
The same crowd, I don't want to be there.
Yeah, that's nice and easy, so don't you miss, like, The Office?
well,
That's right.
in our physical.
Yeah, you know what?
We all
Told my wife, oh, there's a YouTube channel.
So you have to, like, get dressed nice every day in case you Zoom?
No, I have Zoom meetings all the time. Slob usually, but
What do you wear, like, around the house? See, if I worked at home, I'd be like, I want to be in my pajamas.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, that wouldn't be good for me.
Yeah.
I really like working outside the house. Like, I like to dress up. I like
Yeah.
somewhere to go. Like, if I worked at home, I would want to get dressed up, like, to be at home.
who am I waiting for?
But is that helpful to be home?
Shendra?
There for the kids and the bus and all that?
Yeah, that does help.
Shendra?
Oh, that's a good thing.
Yeah, that is good. I like your house. It's a nice house.
Oh.
Somewhere to be around there is sure isn't bad.
Okay, folks, folks. We're going to resume the meeting. Thank you. Thank you. We're resuming the meeting. Okay, at this point in time, the chair, we left off on item 9, which was the chair is prepared to recognize those in wish to speak in opposition to this application. That's where we left off. Do we have anybody that wishes to speak in opposition? Okay, if you could just write your name on the paper and state your name for the record. Yeah, and we're going to ask you to limit your comments to 5 minutes if it's possible.
Sure.
Okay.
My name is Mark Vaserka. I live at 200 Candlewood Lake Road, Brookfield, Connecticut. I come here under tremendous stress and emotion. Back in 1994, when I moved here to this beautiful town, after I closed on my house, there was a few parties going on next door. And I went to the town and I said, what's going on over there? And they said, well, it's a little bit of a club. 13 cars are only allowed to park there. There are certain stipulations that will protect you so you really don't have to worry about it. These are laws that were implemented when they got their approvals for the variance. At that time, Paul Faco was the chairman. We got along pretty good. I cleaned the beach with him. I cleaned the yard for him. Everything was good for quite a few years. And then it started to get a little bit crazier when the new regime, let's say, came in. And what happened was they started to have more and more parties, and nobody would talk to their neighbor and say, hey, Mark, we're having a party. All of a sudden, there's 50, 60 people there. All of a sudden, there were 30, 40, 50 cars there. So I would start writing letters to the town saying, what's going on? What I found is that the town was extremely negligent in enforcing these stipulations, to the tune of almost 40 letters. the people who were there, this is even pre-VFW people, right? They would stare at me. I'd be down on my boat. I'd come off my boat because they knew I was in opposition. I wrote a letter, and I'm getting these people giving me the one-finger salute. I'm like, what's going on here? Curtis Timmerman, you voted against this back in 2014 because you knew it was a self-induced hardship. So this continued on, and the town neglected on a regular basis to enforce this. And at one time when I was down at the lake with my mother, 84 years old, and stepfather, and I come down there and the police showed up. And 6 people, the vice president of the Sokol Club and 5 other people called the police and said Mark was taking pictures of little girls in their bikinis. I cannot begin to tell you how that made me feel. These people are slandering me. Then we had a meeting. We had a meeting with Neil and all the other attorneys to try to work this out. And then they continued that same narrative. He was taking pictures of little girls in bikinis. This is what got me enraged. A few months later then, moving on, a couple more letters, problems, 30, 40, 50 cars parked there. Doors slamming. I hear one night, oh, he doesn't like doors slamming. Some guy with a pickup truck banged the back of his pickup truck 10, 15, 20 times. I have that on film. I have the noise. Then it continued on more and more, and then now we're getting into this battle. I don't want to be here. I want to go home, have peace and quiet. A lot of these people are good people here, right? They're all good people. But I'm being slandered throughout the town. You just heard O'Mara over here saying, I didn't say anyone, drug addicts and alcoholics. I didn't say that. This is how they want to fight. No one comes to talk to me to see what's going on with that. The stipulations are still not being enforced. I have a 3-inch page. I've written letters to the attorneys of this town, to the select person of this town, everybody in this town. And I go there and all I get is aggravation and car doors slamming, all times of the day and night. People there in the morning. I know they have a bar in there. They hang out. They have fun. Good for them. Good for them. There's a lot of respectful people here. But there's a couple of people here, the ones who called me a pedophile and did all that kind of stuff, they're the ones that brought it here. But the town mostly did not enforce the stipulations. If you did that, we probably wouldn't be here. It would have calmed down the storm much earlier, and people would be respectful, and lights would be out at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. And then the one wedding that they had there, because they got shut down, I started getting death threats, text messages. And you're a Candlewood N-word, and you're this, and I'm coming after you. 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone's lighting up that he's sending pictures that he's inside the lake swimming by my property. This is what I've been putting up with. I love the VFW. I pulled out of my house during the food drive. I got out. I said, I don't have any food, guys, but do you accept cash? And I laid $300 in their hand. Please get some food. I'm a patriotic guy myself. They're still not doing it. They're still not enforcing it. The driveway, 30-car driveway next to my house, it's all black. And they should have turned it back and reverted it back to residential, and they didn't. So the town is big time.
You need a couple extra,
Part of this.
if you need 30 more seconds, but if you could wrap up.
So the town really started all this, and there's no dialogue, there was no nothing. I have no objection to people showing up and leaving early and things like that, but it's just a couple of bad apples in there, and they know who they are. They know who the person is that caused all this. And I should not have had to go through this. My parents should not have to see police officers saying I'm taking pictures of little girls in bikinis also. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to the application? Okay, at this point, the applicant has 10 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Neil Marcus, on behalf of the applicant. When I started out and you gave me 45 minutes, I only took 20. I should have treated you like the Supreme Court when you can reserve more part of your argument for your rebuttal, but I'll keep you 10 minutes.
If you need a little, if you need a minute or two extra, you're okay.
I'm only kidding you, but I'd like to do 2 things, though. I'd like to address Michael Leventhal's comments, but interestingly enough, we don't disagree much on the facts. The history of the property is what it is. And as I say, the issue here, which is not apparent from the discussion, but hopefully will be apparent from the pictures. I'm going to submit to you a picture which is a shot. If you'll distribute it, I'll just explain it to the whole board. An excerpt from a map, which again is property. Starting with a picture, that's a photo, an aerial of most of the MC zone. And then if you're looking at the aerial with the docks of Lake Candlewood on the top, to the left, I've put a check mark on the property that's owned by the Sokol Club. So the check mark is actually, you can see a driveway coming into a black area, which was the new parking lot, adjoining the black area, which is the old parking lot, which is directly in front of the house. That's Sokol, and it goes down, obviously, to the waters of Lake Candlewood, and they have a rough beach down there. And of course, if you look to the right, again, with the picture oriented with the lake at the top, then you get O'Hara's, and you get Candlewood Beach East. So you get, and all the white there are the boats for winter storage. And then if you go further north along Candlewood Lake Road, all the blue is I keep calling it Boat Bay because I'm so old, but is the marina that stores blue-colored boats. Got the whites first and then the blues next. But anyway, that gives you an idea of the orientation of the subject property to the MC zone. The predominant thing that you see in this picture, and of course, across the street from the Sokol property, again, property owned by an entity that's controlled by Mr. Vasurka, is what used to be Conrad's Landing. Those were cabins years ago. They've now been made into a non-conforming residential use because it was a pre-existing higher density property. It's certainly not RA40. But you've got that across the street next to O'Hara's, which used to be the tennis club, next to the former Boat Bay facility. And that the orientation of the Sokol is all towards those properties. And interestingly enough, the smallest piece of property to the left side of the Sokol Club is the Vasurka property, which again is pretty non-conforming. You can see it has a couple of large structures on a narrow lot. But that's the neighborhood. Then the second thing that I gave you was a map that shows you basically the same thing, except for it's color-coded. On the map, the aqua-colored is the the land here is the MC zone, the former RS40, but the MC zone, which are the marinas, and that's the zone which we wish to attach to. But it gives you an idea that not only is that property next door to us to the north zoned MC today, but it is also pretty much fully developed. I mean, it's all covered. It's not a lot of open space or green areas. It is certainly not anything that's oriented towards a residential use. So that's just a little backup as to why we believe that we meet the requirements of the zoning regulations for compatibility, which of course is what the Planning Commission has already found as well in the referral under 8-3A. But in his opposition to Leventhal, raised a couple of issues I'd like to address pretty quickly. He says that the usage of the property the Sokol property has increased over the years and there's more noise and music. Well, let me tell you, it is not the VFW that is making noise and music. The VFW meets there once or twice a month, and they do public service. They don't have parties, per se. They did have a major event honoring the naming of the facility after a Brookfield veteran who is now deceased, but whose mother spoke to us earlier this evening. And that was a large event, and there were a lot of people there. But that's so rare that that occurs. But the issue here is, you know, if you're hearing noise and music, I mean, you've got the Candlewood Beach East Club next door. They're not a nuisance to our property. We have no complaint. But clearly, they have noise. They have noise in their operation. If Mr. Vasurka is hearing noise, I'm not sure which property it's directly coming from. But I can't disagree that there are certain parties and events that the Sokol Club does have, but the actual membership of the Sokol Club is historically low, and the usage of the property actually has decreased over the years. The issue, though, here is some of the complaints is that the property's usage will change. The property's use will not change when you go to the MC zone. The property's use will only change if this commission modifies the use. We can't change the use. So if you make it MC today, tomorrow you can't see boats stored on there. If anybody wants to store boats on this facility, they have to come to this commission and get a special permit and a site plan that conforms to the MC zone. Due to the fact that the property is so small in the MC zone, it'd be virtually impossible to do that. But on the other hand, if the current use is modified at all, i.e., when the parking lot was increased from 13 cars to 30 cars, that did come to this commission, and restrictions were put on it. Landscaping was required, screening was required, all proper location. As a matter of fact, hours of operation were also agreed to. All of those don't exist now because of the fact that it exists as a non-conforming use by variance. You can't say today to the Sokol, you have to, not have any music on the site after 10 a.m., after 10 p.m., or you can't serve an alcoholic beverage before 11 a.m. I mean, you can't do all that now. But clearly, if the club ever had the proper zoning and came to you for any modification, you could do that. So to the extent that Attorney Leventhal is saying that we think that there will be an expansion of use and it will negatively impact the neighboring properties, it's the exact opposite. If there is ever an expansion of use, there's control. Right now, there's not. So it's kind of an inverse logic that I don't think you should apply. But the same thing goes with increased need for septic. At the moment, the septic is what it is. The limitations on the building are by the fire marshal. The limitations on the site are pretty much by parking. But if any of that comes to be modified, this commission could require a B100 of the site, current testing of the septic capability, and a modification if it were important. So again, by getting into a zone that can regulate the property, this commission and the town of Brookfield generally, the health department, et cetera, has a lot more control. It's not that it's going to negatively impact property values or health and welfare. It's the opposite at the moment. Right now, there are very few controls, and it makes sense to have a more logical use of the property with the appropriate controls. In terms of property values, if the town of Brookfield taxes will reduce, I'm almost through and I'll be with you in a minute. If the town of Brookfield's property tax assessor will reduce Mr. Vasurka's property because of the impact of the commercial zone, it's already there. There's no further reduction by recognizing the MC designation because he's already gotten the benefit or suffered the loss of the $30,000 in value. There's nothing before this commission that would indicate that any properties will be negatively impacted in value by changing the zoning designation, but not the use. That's really what we're talking about. So Mr. Vasserka himself complained that the town has been negligent in enforcing stipulations. It's the same thing. If you want regulation of a property, put it in a zone where you can regulate it. And that's we don't object to that. We have no objection to the regulation of this property's use by the town in a MC zone, because it makes sense. So you heard a lot of good stories about people who use this property but feel that as it's currently zoned, it limits the potential. And at the end of the day, both the Sokol Club and the VFW, and it's interesting, the speakers tonight were more from VFW than from Sokol, but in reality, if you look at the membership, a great number of the VFW members are members of the Sokol and vice versa. It just, coincidentally, these are the same people. So whether they meet on Tuesday night as a Sokol Club, on Saturday morning as a VFW, it doesn't really make a huge impact on the use of the site. So, taking
Marcus,
10 minutes, yes, sir.
You've exceeded your time.
I know.
If it's something you can wrap up really quickly.
I'm doing it.
Okay.
You cut me off to do that.
All right.
I was going to cut myself off. I know. Having used up my time, and I appreciate the fact that you allowed us to do this, we'll ask the applicant will rest. We'll ask the commission to examine the presentations that have been made to you, and hopefully conclude in the same respect that the Planning Commission did, that we do conform with the town plan of conservation development, and this would be an appropriate and beneficial zoning amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask if there's any questions from the commissioners for the applicant.
Mr. Chairman, I have some
Commissioner Timmerman?
clarifications. A couple of things as I listened to both presentations. I was, back in 2014, I was the chairman of the ZBA for the first, the variance that was denied. And in there, we denied it because we felt like it was a self-induced hardship. And when we deliberated on it, we recognized that this residential property is like a buffer from the residential zone into the commercial zone right next to it. And we felt that we didn't want any more creep to come over we didn't want that commercial zone to start moving over. So that's why it was denied, aside from this self-induced hardship.
Commissioner Timmerman, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this segment, I believe, is for questions for that.
I know, but I have to, respond to some inaccuracies in the data put forward.
Well, again,
because they involved me personally.
Okay.
On some of these.
Well, again, it's for questions. It's for questions.
Okay,
All right.
I have a question.
You could phrase it in the form of a question.
Yes. That why, if we change, to Mr. Marcus, if we change it to a MC zone and the 100-foot buffer from a residential zone from a commercial, wouldn't that make everything in that property non-conforming?
Except for the use. You're correct. I said because of the size of the property, it's so small that the likelihood is even in the MC zone. But, for example, we can meet your parking requirement for the size of the building in the MC zone.
But you're not allowed to put parking within 100 feet of a residential lot line.
That's correct.
That's my
correct.
question. It seems like you're creating a nonconformity just by changing the zone, because your entire lot is non-conforming because there's things within 100 feet. Is
Kurt,
there
I
some
have to agree.
recognition of that?
There are existing nonconformities that we'll never get rid of because of the size of the lot in any zone. I mean, we have to have if the lot were 3 acres, then we could start conforming. If it's under 2 acres, we'd have trouble conforming in the MC. But we can be a lot more conforming under the MC regulations than we are under the single-family residential. So to that extent, right now we have a variance, which is ineffective, to put the new parking all along the north side is far away from the residential use next door to us, the Vazirka property. That is still within 100 feet. There's no question about it. But it becomes much more conforming than it is now, because right now, the parking in front of the property is actually probably about 10 or 15 feet at best from Mr. Vazirka's. So yeah, I can't disagree with you. It's still a difficult site to work with, but any modifications can be granted by this commission and by the ZBA because the use is now allowed in the zone. That's a big difference.
Any further questions?
I only have clarifications on what happened, that's all.
Commissioner Armet?
Mr. Thank you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman. I have a question. Has there been a change, a transfer of ownership since 1989? There has been,
No. A transfer of ownership
since 1989.
of the subject property,
Yes.
of the Sokol? No.
Is there a liquor license?
No. They don't sell liquor. They're a club.
Oh, they don't
No,
sell
no,
it.
no.
Okay. And are there closing hours for the?
No. I mean, the club has their own rules and regulations when they want to shut the place down and go home, but there are no municipal regs on hours of
Well, that-
operation.
Yeah, it's their closing hours.
Yeah, they say everybody's got to be out of here at 12 o'clock on Saturday night. That's when people have to be out.
Any additional questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Holmes?
Did you call me mister?
He called me Mr. too.
Oh, thank you. I said
Holmes,
mister.
Commissioner?
That was funny.
He didn't fool me.
Commission.
So my question is, what will you do with the zone change? Are you going to build a brand-new parking lot with accommodating how many cars? Like, it seems to be like parking is the biggest concern.
We're going to try to use the existing parking lot that we built when we got approval from both this commission and the ZBA before it was overturned by the court. We're going to continue the landscaping in places there, and other than that, there are no real intentions to do anything.
How many cars get parked in this spot?
Well, right now,
Typically, I
we're
know there's
13
spots, but
on,
it sounds like there are more.
we could have a legitimate 30-car parking lot with, regular zoning compliant stalls, for 10 by 20, more or less. We can do that. Right now, to the extent we put more than 13 cars, we have to get off of the original site and go on to the quarter-acre
Right.
piece that we bought from the state of Connecticut. It is not restricted by the 13. I'm going to ask for a second. Approximately how many cars can you put up in that corner? About 30, yeah. They're not parked in they're not parked in
People
regular
park
stalls.
somewhere else and walk to this property
Yes.
often when there's a large gathering?
If there's a large
They
gathering,
park
people,
elsewhere
well,
nearby.
we park
then
next
go.
door at the beach club when it's off-season, when they're closed. And then you have to walk around on Candle Lake Road and back in. Or we have friendly neighbors across the street. Some people allow parking in their driveways.
May I say something to that question, if you don't mind?
We allow.
Well, you have to ask.
Chairman, may I say something to that question, please?
Yes, we'll allow it, but if you could be brief.
Very brief. Excuse me, Mr. Mark.
Sure, that's okay.
When the Superior Court overturned the variance and the special permit was deemed voided, that means that 30-car space parking lot, in our position, should have been removed. They got a special permit to add 17 spaces. They had 13. When we went to enforcement, they said, we will not enforce them to remove it because the material that they used is not impervious. They used gravel. So right now, they've still got the 30-car parking lot in front of their property.
Also, is this from you? This is from, who prepared us this?
That's internal.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Well, I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the commissioners? Okay. Well, at this time, we would take a motion to proceed on this. There is a tremendous amount of information that we have received tonight. There is a tremendous amount of information in our briefing booklet, and this property has a significant history going back a number of years. There's also a number of arguments in favor and opposed, a number of questions with respect to the zone and conforming and non-conforming. So I would ask for a motion to continue this to the next meeting date. If anyone would like to make that motion. Commissioners?
I'll make a motion that we continue 202 Candlewood Lake Road, Z22-73, Danbury Solid Gymnastics. 202 Candlewood Lake, I got all that. To continue this to the next zoning meeting.
Can we get a second on that?
Second.
Okay. We have a motion to continue this to our next meeting in lieu of the amount of material that we received. Can I have a vote on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And all opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. At this point in time, I'd like to take a motion that we reseat Chairman Getz as chairman of the zoning commission, and I'd like to a motion for that.
I make a motion to reseat Chairman Getz to
Do I
the
have-
zoning commission.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much.
You said this was internal?
Yeah, I don't know where the
Oh. That's,
they didn't submit it as part, it's not
no,
stamped
but
in.
it should be, I mean, if we're getting it, but it's
No, but I'm just
probably
saying it
public
wasn't-
record.
Yeah, I think, right, this was not stamped in as part of a record that we read, so it's not the briefing.
Already going in.
Good. Yes, absolutely. Oh, yeah, the hearing's still open. Yep, yep, you can do that. But that's a good idea. I like that. I like that. I'll see you outside, give you a second to back up here.
We've broken the rules, so now we're.
I think you should turn it, you can turn it, you don't, yeah, you can turn it in now if you want. Give it to Michelle. Ask her to,
Yeah, but I hear you telling me.
So, it wasn't a question of clarification.
I don't think it was maybe recess, but
It was just one.
we'll just take a delay in seating you.
Probably a good thing, because it means that we're on to the next
Really
one.
recessed right now.
Okay.
Just give it to Angela. It was apparently a petition that no one wrote.
This is my third.
Oh, yeah, well, the public hearing is still open, and we are accepting information. Okay?
And it's been going on.
This is, file is getting larger by the moment.
This is the file right here.
Yeah, if I could just ask the commissioners to submit any, those
Yes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
pictures
I'm glad you.
back to the, file.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things,
Absolutely.
like
Excuse me, folks, we're still in session here, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Folks, could I just get, I'm sorry, I should have asked for this. Can we get the pictures returned for the part of the file?
Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you.
take care. Mark.
Okay, commissioners, next item up on the
You
agenda.
want these back? I think we can keep these, right?
Well, I didn't have every single, I didn't,
I think these were for us to look at. Yeah, just one
Yeah, but I don't know
set.
okay, then if
Because I
that's-
wrote all over mine.
Okay, fine, well then, if you could just give me one set for the files, if you could review that and just, there's 3 papers, and I'm not sure which one is which. Those, I think, were just submitted. I don't know if we stamped those in or not.
You want
Okay.
yours back or?
Oh, and here, Fran, here's one more document for the folder that was submitted tonight. And this also goes in there. Okay.
In the interest of the attorney's time, if we wouldn't mind moving the item for 70 Stony Hill up, because we're hoping it's going to
Okay.
be drawn.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Again, if I may, we are still in session, so if we could all bring your attention to bear on the agenda. This time, the chair will entertain a motion to change the order of our remaining business. Item number 7 under old business. In the interest of proximity and time, we would entertain a motion to make that our next order of business instead of item number 4, if we could switch that.
Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the commission, I'd like to make a motion that we move up item 7A to be our next item. That's application Z23-5.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Do we have a second for that motion?
second that.
Mr. Pratt seconding the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call the order. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed by nay. Are there any abstentions? That motion carries. So the next item up is...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to recuse myself from this application because I have a personal interest in it.
Okay.
Because I live down the street.
Thank you for that, Mr. Timmerman. So item number 7 becomes...
If he's going to recuse himself, does he have to step down, or how do we proceed?
Well, he's an alternate not voting right
Okay.
now anyway, so I think he's good. So item number 7 will be in place of number 4, and then we will go back to the regular order. So next item up is 70 Stony Hill Road, Z-235. Attorney Neil R. Marcus for Infinity Development LLC. Licking Danny Lynn, member. Site plan application arising from efforts to reach a settlement in the case of Infinity Development LLC, v. Planning Commission of the Town of Brookfield, HHD-CV-18-609, 2085-S. Application for affordable housing, 3-lot subdivision, number PL-17-9, submitted to Planning Commission on June 26th, 2017, and approved with conditions on February 15th, 2018.
Yes, if I
The
can.
applicant here, please identify yourself for the record. Thank you.
Well, again, I'm not sure that I'm the applicant, but I'd like to explain. I'm Neil Marcus, and I do represent the Infinity Development in the litigation. It is still pending before Judge Ted O'Hanlon up in Hartford, which the litigation that is pending is an appeal of certain conditions of approval. It's not an appeal of a denial, but an appeal of conditions of approval. And this case has a long history, as you can see by the fact that it was filed in 2017 as an application. And I'll recognize that actually Kurt had dark hair then, no gray one. That's how old it is. But I still didn't have any hair back then. But the fact of the matter is that there was an appeal from a denial of the Conservation Commission, Inland Wetland Commission, of the same application. And unfortunately, all of this predates Attorney Schellenberg's involvement on behalf of the town. It really goes back, I think, to definitely Tom Beecher's period as town council. So we settled the case with the Conservation Commission, but it took us the better part of 5 years, 4.5, 5 years to do that. The appeal from the Planning Commission conditions of approval was put on the back burner by the court, because if we never resolved the conservation, the inland wetlands issues, we would never be able to address the second case very well at that time. So when we settled with the Inland Wetlands Commission, we went back, and again, it was still with Tom Beecher in front of Judge Berger, and it was agreed that we would go back to the Planning Commission and show them the new plan from the Conservation of Inland Wetlands and see if we could compromise the issues of the conditions of approval with the Planning Commission based on the fact that a 29-unit project was now going to be 13 units. It was less than 50%. It was an affordable housing application. And of course, in the interim, the town of Brookfield had adopted 2 moratoriums on affordable housing. But this application predated and was basically grandfathered from the moratoriums. We are currently still dealing with the Planning Commission, and of course now Attorney Schellenberg has taken the file. And one of the conditions of approval was that the Planning Commission approved subject to the Zoning Commission approving. And we said, well, you can't do that because Connecticut law is pretty clear that a condition of approval cannot rely on an entity's approval outside of the control of the Planning Commission. So that's the issue the main issue that we're trying to resolve. The Planning Commission has now raised the issue as to whether they should have even granted the approval of the plan back in 2018 because affordable housing should go to zoning. And there's a dispute between council on that issue. Judge O'Hanlon up in Hartford has agreed that the matter would be referred to Judge Pickard in Torrington. And Judge Pickard will meet with Attorney Schellenberg and with me, and we will discuss hopefully he'll mediate, and he'll see if he can resolve this issue. Because the issue is, if the Planning Commission thinks that they shouldn't have approved it in the first place, well, then we just have to try that case before Judge O'Hanlon, which again is 5 years after it was decided. If the Judge Pickard has a method by which he agrees that the Planning Commission does have the authority to approve it, then we can go back to the Planning Commission and see if they'll approve it. Why it is on your agenda is because when we were in front of the Planning Commission, I offered as a potential compromise, why don't we, while we're waiting for the Planning Commission to decide this, ask the Zoning Commission to take a look at the site plan and tell us if there are any issues of public health or safety, which is 8-30G, that are of concern. So that's why it appears on here. I don't think, and to my recollection, I never signed an application. But if I did, I don't recall that I signed it. I thought it came here. Did you find one?
I thought the understanding is that you're just going to withdraw the submission.
Well, that's correct. I want to tell them why it's here. Yeah, no, we're going to get there very quickly. But I'm saying, so I'm not, in my mind, I have no formal application before you. Okay. And I don't want, if it is considered an application, it's by a misunderstanding. I do still hold open the offer. If you guys want to look at it, we have no objection. But in the meantime, until Judge Pickard meets with us and until we get back to the Planning Commission and potentially Judge O'Hanlon, there really is little involvement of this commission. So I don't think I have to withdraw the submission. What I'm going to have to ask you to do is to accept that we've never made an application to this commission at this point. And therefore, there's no reason for this to appear on your agenda. If at some point we agree to ask you to review it, it'll come back onto your agenda. So that's our position at this point.
Mr. Marcus?
Yes, ma'am.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. So you do not have a site plan application before this commission?
No.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well,
Yeah.
that's fine. If we can remove it.
All right, thank you.
So, and again, I apologize. This error or misunderstanding, whatever you want to call it, was done with the best of intentions to try to resolve pending litigation from 2018. And that's what we're still trying to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any commissioners have any questions at this time?
I do.
Mr. Kane.
Thank you. And this, I guess, is a question to Director Hadza. My understanding, based on your statements, is that we actually do not have an application before the zoning commission. So it doesn't appear that we would be able to deny what we do not have. The next question I would have is, it sounds to me like there's a lot of pending items still in the hopper behind the scenes that need to be rectified, and that they need to be rectified. So there's really no action that we can take on this. So my question is do we just vote to take this off the agenda, without prejudice? Certainly people are welcome to apply in the future when things are resolved or in a better state, but there's nothing we can actually do now or in the immediate future on this application, or this line item, I should say.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Yes,
Ms. Hudson, if I may, before you answer, I wanted to ask a question myself that may help or make it easier for you to answer, but I was going to put my question to the town land use attorney and ask that it's very confusing whether we actually have an application before us, but not being sure, couldn't we still deny it because it's not complete? Because we have received something, have we not?
Yes, so
You are right, certainly there's confusion about that, but I think Attorney Marcus's representation tonight that basically he does not consider that he has made an application before you, and if he has, he's withdrawing it. That's the understanding. So now there's really nothing to. Right, and so that is correct, right, Attorney Marcus?
For any reason you're considering an application, it's withdrawn.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if.
This is basically what you said.
Well, sir, we have a Z323-5, so that's why it was assigned an application number.
We consider applications not usually things this amorphous.
But we accept the fact that you are withdrawing it.
Right, so this does have a very confusing history, and just to hopefully summarize it a little better for the commission, as Attorney Marcus said, what we are attempting to do is settle an appeal that Attorney Marcus's client took, as he said, of conditions that were attached to a planning commission approval. And because one of those conditions required that the applicant come before this commission for approval, we originally thought that this might be a way to resolve the matter. Then there were just too many other issues that arose. We reached an impasse, and we decided that we need to mediate that matter. So basically, we're just looking to unwind what happened, not have anything before the commission at this point in time. We will mediate. We will see if we can resolve our differences with the help of a Superior Court judge, and then the applicant may or may not come back before this commission.
With an application?
At that point, yes, it probably, right.
It would lead the witness, but just to clarify.
Yes, I think if the applicant comes before this commission, it will be with an application.
Thank you.
And the answer, the long and the short of it is we're both hoping that Judge Pickard is smarter than both of us.
How's that possible?
The planning commission appeal presents some very interesting but difficult issues that we have to deal with. And the fact that there's a moratorium in place right now, and there was a moratorium that right after the planning, after the planning application was filed, enters into the picture as well. So we have a lot of issues that we have to deal with and determine what is the best way to proceed.
And if you want an honest view of the history, ask Kurt. He does.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but that's where we are at this point.
Any other questions? Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Bob.
At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to remove this item from the agenda pending any further developments.
Mr. Chairman, if it please the commission, I would recommend, or would make a motion that we remove item Z23-5 from the commission agenda, period.
Thank you, Mr. Kame. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it.
Mr. Pratt, we have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call it. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Are there any abstentions? Hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you, Attorney Marcus.
Thank you. Your patience. You guys are just beginning this thing. Thank you. Well, 5 years it went by. Thank you.
The next item up on the agenda, which would have been number 4, is the review of our minutes from the February 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Zoning Commission. Does any commissioner here have any questions or comments about those minutes? I hear none. Chair would then recognize a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I make a recommendation, a motion that we approve the minutes of the February 23rd, 2023 zoning commission minutes as submitted.
Mr. Kane has made a motion to approve the minutes. Does he have a second?
I second.
Mr. Komar has seconded the motion. Any discussion about the motion? Hearing no discussion. All the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Are there any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion to accept the minutes carries. Our next item up, number 5, enforcement, zoning enforcement officer's report. Mr. Lally.
Yes, sir. 47 High Ridge Road, I did some inspections today. I checked the property as of today. There's been no change in it. I'm still waiting for an inspection date. I believe it's going to be with council on site, from what I understand. But once I have an affirmative date, I'll let the commission know when that's going to take place. 271 Federal Road, the White Star Properties. Again, I was out there again today. The cease and desist that I placed out there last year is still affixed to the door. There's been no change. There's been no complaints in the office.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I did have a question about that.
Yes.
At this time, it seems like the compliance is in place and we've
Correct.
already ruled on the application. Would you make a recommendation to then remove it at this time pending any new violation?
Yes, that is my recommendation. I
Oh,
will
okay.
be removing this from the enforcement report.
Thanks, sorry for the interruption.
No problem. Nope. 31 Green Knoll Drive, the McGovern property. The hearing was held. Land Use Director Hadza had that Tuesday night at Brookfield Town Hall here, and the hearing officer did uphold that citation and fine on that property, so.
If I may, I
Yes, sir.
was present at that hearing as only an observer, as a citizen of the town, and I just wanted to commend all who participated on a job well done. And it was very long and lengthy, so it wasn't easy, I think, for those people that were actually doing the work. Thank you for that.
Moving on, the 107 Stony Hill Road, the Nacer residence, with the contractor's yard, the vehicles, everything's been out of there. So again, this has been out here for a long time. I'm gonna remove this from the enforcement report. As of right now, there is no current violation exists on there, at least for the commercial equipment. So it may be coming back around again, but not for the commercial equipment. So I will be removing this. Moving on to the citation, 89 Wisconsin Road, Gone residents. Still waiting the ruling from the Danbury Superior Court on that. There's been no update on that as of today. And then 35 Hidden Brook Drive, the Torres residents, they received a citation that the commission had directed me to send, have certified mail receipt. They have not responded. So my next step of action is going to be a notice of citation and then move forward with whatever actions are required, whether hearing officer or Superior Court. So,
I just had a quick question on
Yes,
that
sir.
one. Is that something that is gonna happen in the immediate future, next 10 days or something?
which one?
Notice of citation?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
And that's it for the enforcement.
Any other commissioners have any questions of Mr. Lally at this time?
Got you. I have a quick
Yes,
question.
Ms. Holmes.
Any updates on growing seeds?
Growing seeds.
And that whole, is that closed?
Yeah.
Case.
Attorney Schellenberg, would you like to speak on this?
Yes, that case was tried, and we're awaiting a decision from the court. I'm trying to remember. I think it was tried in January, so there's 120 days for the court to make a decision. Just going back to the Gone matter, I believe we're getting very close to the 120 days. So hopefully there will be a decision coming out in that case very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Lawley. I apologize for doing an excessive amount of talking, but I had to sit with my mouth shut for an hour and a half, and I'm not used to that. Next item up on the agenda, number 6, is review correspondence, follow-up questions from ZBA regarding residential portions of the TCD/TCDP, based on a letter from ZBA Chairman A. Donnelly. Is there any update on that?
Mr. Chairman, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, this was my responsibility, and it is still in the works. We are drafting a correspondence back to Chairman Donnelly regarding more specifics regarding that, and I will have that ready for the commission at our next meeting date.
Thank you, Mr. Payne.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to that, and knowing that this loophole remains open for anybody to walk through, would you like me to at least put forth some recommendations on verbiage to close it so the commission can debate it?
I certainly think it's fine by me, but I would throw it open to the rest of the commissioners and see what people have to say about it.
I would say yes, and I would welcome an email from you. We do have information that you provided, which was meaningful regarding this, and as I say, it's fortunately there was not enough days in the calendar.
Sure. No, I just, I identified 2 sections to throw verbiage in to close the loophole, so that's all I'm.
I think your
for an
original
eventual
effort
public.
was very commendable as well. I only had a slight wanting of a modification of the final paragraph. Other than that,
Oh, I'm not talking about the letter back
Oh.
to the ZBA. I'm
You
talking
mean the
about
actual-
fixing the
yeah, I know, I
real
know.
problem, yeah.
But
Anything
I'm
that
saying
goes
that was a
toward-
good job too.
Oh, thank you.
Anything that goes toward closure would help.
Yeah.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, number 8, new business. Item A, Z-2311, 5 Obtuse Hill Road, St. Joseph's Church, waiver of ZBA fees. Is there anyone present who would like to speak to that?
Yeah, well, it was brought to my attention that the St. Joseph's Church is looking for a waiver of fees. Originally, it was under the thought that the waiver of fees came from the First Selectman's office, but it turns out the zoning commission can waive the fees for for this type of application. So it's up to the commission. It's for St. Joseph's Church, which is tax exempt. They're looking to do a ZBA application to the Zoning Board of Appeals for use in the school. So, which would be, I don't know, that's use change, use variance.
So would you entertain a motion at this time to waive the fees?
How would we proceed on this?
Yeah.
How much are the fees?
Please.
So, yeah, Mr. Lawley is right on, so we did.
Right on.
We to receive an application to the ZBA for a use change. In my research, they actually appealed to the First Selectwoman. In my research, it turns out that she only has the power according to the charter to waive building fees, but not zoning fees. The ordinance says that the zoning commission sets all zoning fees and has the power to do that. Therefore, I think in the past, it's been the custom of the land use director to waive those fees, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I don't think it's a power that I want to wield. So it would be in your purview to waive those fees. I believe, Mr. Lawley, the fees are
$210.
$210. So it's strictly up to just to waive them or not for this applicant.
And by doing it, this is on a case-by-case basis. We're not making a precedent for future applications.
Right, and if I may just, I'm wrong on that. It's 360. They submitted a check for 360.
Thank you. Mr. Timmerman.
Yes, was it 360 total, and they only want waived of the 300 because 60 goes to the state, and they realize 60 can't be? Yeah.
Well, I would also like to agree and commend Ms. Hodza that it's probably better to be transparent about this, and probably good for us to at least be aware, because we might not know if these fees are being waived on a regular basis, for example. Mr. Kane, did you?
Yeah, I just want to say I am some familiarity with this. I know the Selectman's Office has waived building permit fees for political parties in the town as a matter of course, and that I don't see any problem. I know we generally kind of defer somewhat, or somewhat helpful to nonprofits that benefit the town, regardless of what their perspective is on things. So,
Thank you.
If you need a motion, is that the?
Yeah, is there any other questions? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion on item Z 23-11 that we waive the zoning fees for the town of Brookfield for St. Joseph's Church with respect to Z 23-11.
If I may amend, with the amount being $360?
It's 300. It's only
It's
300.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. The amount being $300. Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
Mr. Pratt has seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will call the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay.
No.
We have a nay. Are there any abstentions? Hearing no abstentions, I think the vote was 4-1.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Mr. Chairman.
Is there any other new business before we move on to tabled items?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we add as item 8B under new business, application Z 23-14, which is a text amendment to our existing moratorium on cannabis sales. This would extend the moratorium to May 16th, 2024. It's my understanding that a public hearing is in the process of being set.
You want me to set the?
Yeah. well, and,
If you add it to your agenda.
Right, to allow time for the Planning Commission and the Western Council of Government to comment. We already have a moratorium in place, and the changes to this would be to change the period from 12 months to 24 months, and to change the expiration date from May 16th of 2023 to May 16th of 2024. There are no other changes, and this is an existing moratorium that is in place and that this commission has previously passed.
So we have that application in our packet,
So I
and
think we have, excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
please.
Just, we need to add that to the agenda then first, if you by two-thirds vote, if you agree.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion that we do that, add this to our agenda as item 8B.
Mr. Kane has made a motion to add this item to our agenda as item 8B. Do we have a second for the motion?
I second.
Mr. Komar seconded the motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing and seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay.
Nay.
And are there any abstentions? Motion carries 4-1. So now the item is on our agenda. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, at this point in time, we would like to set a public hearing we need a motion to set a public hearing on this.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion that we set a public hearing date for May 11th to allow the Planning Commission and the Western Connecticut Council of Governments to comment on this.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. He's made a motion to set a public hearing for May 11th, 2023. Do we have a second to the motion? Mr. Pratt has made a second to the motion. Do we have any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? Motion carries 4-1. Thank you, Mr. Kane. Next on the agenda, next item on the agenda is item number 9, tabled items. A is an alpha revision of zoning fee schedule, land use director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, like Mr. King, I'm a little far behind on my scheduled activities, so I respectfully request some more time to pull that together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is number 10, commissioner comments and informed discussion. Informal, I always say informed, that's certainly a Freudian slip.
I hope
really
it's
not.
informed.
Would any commissioners like to make any comments, informed or informal at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 11, adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased to make a motion that we adjourn our time together tonight.
Do we have a second? Mr. Pratt seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries.